Sure. Fine with me.
All right.
Sounds like a plan, yeah.
All right, then. Let's get started. All right. Okay. As we mentioned, we're going to start off with where you may agree. So, Peter, give us your outlook on the US dollar with what many are calling irresponsible or reckless fiscal and monetary policies. Where do you see the dollar headed?
Well, I've had a bearish outlook on the dollar for quite some time. And the dollar has managed to stay afloat despite the fact that the underlying economic fundamentals for the dollar continue to deteriorate. In fact, our response to COVID only accelerated that process. We're printing way too much money. You can see the results in our exploding trade deficits, which are at all-time record highs, our budget deficits, which are at all-time record highs. The entire economy is a gigantic bubble. The reason that it hasn't collapsed yet is because the world still continues to have confidence in the dollar and confidence in the Fed's ability to rein in inflation. Inflation has now reared its head in a very conspicuous manner. Everybody is now talking about inflation, yet everybody expects either inflation to be transitory and just kind of go away on its own, or in the absence of that, they expect the Federal Reserve to do something about it. But I think when the world realizes that inflation is here to stay and that the Fed is going to do nothing about it except make it worse, the Fed really can't fight inflation. I mean, if it could, it would already be doing it. The reason it's not is because it can't. I mean, it could, but not without completely collapsing this house of cards economy that has been built atop the foundation that they've erected over the years, which is artificially low interest rates, excess consumption, debt borrowing, financial bubbles, and speculation, including what's happening with Bitcoin, and so there's no politically viable way for the Fed to take away the punch bowl. And so when the markets realize this, I think support is going to drop out from the dollar. I mean, the Fed is going to keep printing dollars to buy up bonds to artificially suppress rates, finance budget deficits, and sustain asset bubbles. But they can only do that so long as foreigners are willing to hold dollars and invest them in U.S. financial assets, which I don't think they'll do. Then the bottom drops out of the dollar, and then the inflation really explodes. We see a much bigger increase in prices than what we're already experiencing. And then we reach the point where the Fed either has to try to put out the fire or just let it completely burn the economy. But by then, interest rates have to rise dramatically, and the resulting financial crisis will make 2008 look like a Sunday school picnic. There won't be any bailouts, including for the U.S. government, which will have no choice but to default not only on a lot of its obligations like Social Security, but it won't be able to pay interest on the national debt, let alone the principal.
All right, you paint a pretty bleak picture there, Peter, but it is one that many are starting to adjust to, particularly as you point out that the Fed may be finding itself stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, Alex, where do you stand on this? Do you agree that this potentially irresponsible fiscal and monetary stimulus may lead to the ultimate collapse of the U.S. dollar?
Well, we have a history of about 700 fiat currencies. All of them lost over 90% of their value to date. So this is not a new idea. This is not something that we have to struggle with. I think we kind of created a new experiment when we went off the gold standard in 1971. So if you think of the dollar as a new experiment, it's about 41 years old, and Bitcoin is a new experiment that is 13 years old, right? So every time we had a recession since the 1970s, the Fed jumped in and reflated the economy. We are not really allowing our real economy to operate through cycles. The Fed and the Treasury are effectively restricting the economy. They're putting a safety net under the economy and reflating it to make sure that zombie companies and all this debt that we have disappears. And so because of that, we have a dollar that is continuously losing value. We have to print more and more dollars. 2020 is one example. Before it was obviously 2008. Before that, it was 2000. Before it was 1991. So all those recessions that we went through were effectively cured through a reflation that was done through printing of money, right? And now with printing trillions, we used to print just a few billions and people were shocked. But these days we are printing trillions and no one even cares. So 40% of all the dollars ever created were printed in the last 12 months. So the monetary inflation was 40%. The stock market went up 40%. But they're telling us it's a consumer price index is only up 5%. So obviously the numbers just don't match.
Yeah. The